56 that was brought forward by Sheila Malcolmson, our mental health and addictions minister here in BC. And essentially it means that in 6 months, 23 days, or the 23rd of January, I think, if you're possessing heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, fentanyl, MDMA, then you are effectively immune from the law as long as it is up to 2.5 grams, and there's some other stipulations. I'm sure you can't be selling it near school, stuff like that. But in essence, it's to directly deal with the overdoses. So they've specified it to these drugs because these are the drugs that are killing people, and they want a response for that. So I mean, it's quite amazing. It's only localized here in BC though. It's up to 2.5 grams, so kind of arbitrary. What if you have a little bit more or less than that? How will they deal with it? But it's also an interesting that it doesn't include some things like psilocybin. So yeah, it really is a direct response to deal with overdose deaths and the toxic drug supply, which it may or may not help.
So what also does is it sort of removes the stigma. One of the biggest stigma with all of these drugs is you get to go to jail. So you won't you won't have to do that, right? So that helps people talk to the doctors more, helps people open up that they do have these drugs on them and possess them and use them. But what needs to happen beyond this is the safe supply, is this supply chain that's lacking. MAPS US and MAPS PBC have done multiple clinical trials with MAPS Canada as well to show that MDMA is effective. They've done multiple phase 1, phase 2 trials, they've done phase 3, they're continuing to do phase 3, but there's still a lot of data that's missing and that needs to be generated. Once that's done, how do you make sure this is available? One of the earlier panels, I think David Wood said that we expect to see MDMA as a prescription drug next year, which is true. We do expect to see that next year, the following year. But where is that supply chain going to come from? Who is going to make sure that once that is allowed, that is available? And that's lacking in Canada in a massive format. And this is a bit of a bias for me because that's what our company does, but I really think that's the key that's missing today that needs to be addressed by regulation, by legalization, by the government head on.
Yeah. Psilocybin access for 6 months, they've been using it, it's their medicine. Them and their doctor would agree that it's the only helpful thing for them to manage their heroin use. And while they've been asking for 6 months for access to psilocybin, the government ignores that and instead says no, but if you want to access the hard drugs that you were addicted to, that's totally fine.
Charged with an intention to distribute 2.5 grams. It's a highly potent substance. So I think that 2.5 gram limit applied to all of these substances was just administratively simplest, and there's still a lot of room for law enforcement to enforce hazards to public health.
This is all part of in a good way, it's part of the social movement where we are making some movement forward. I think we need to celebrate that. But it's always a question of taking what you can get and then asking for more. So the whole war on drugs and the prohibition movement is so absurd that any attempt to sort of fix it a little bit here and there, it just starts poking holes somewhere else, as Kirk has demonstrated so many times. So I think it's certainly a positive move, but it's not going to be the end of the story, and we can expect the details of it to engender their own challenges and hopefully further movement forward. But it's certainly still a broken system.
For MDMA. I think so far it's psilocybin that's being used. Yeah, it is a physician who has to take it forward, whereas with Section 56, it's an individual. And then, from what I understand, I'm not super well versed in this, but then that individual was able to go to source medicine and go to a therapist of their choosing. So it's a very different kind of pathway, and they're not coherent with each other. So it's sort of like Zach, you were saying, there's this incoherence that happens. And I mean, from what I understand, people aren't getting Section 56 exemptions anymore now that the SAP program is in place, but the criteria for that are so stringent. You have to show that you've failed on these lines of treatment in order to be a candidate. And so it's like, why does it have to get to that point? And it's also very physician-driven. And I think that physician even has to be present for the administration of the substance as well, which is that kind of the model that we want to work with, and is that something I think physicians are interested in? That doesn't really speak to kind of the multidisciplinary, team-based kind of model care that we'd be looking at ideally, I think, going forward in psychedelic psychotherapy.